Hello, and this is Maths with El Profelo. In this symbol, we're going to do another practice on working with the Legendre symbol. And we've talked about that the Legendre symbol is simply a notational approach to help us determine if a number modulo an odd prime number is a quadratic residue or is a quadratic non-residue modulo that odd prime number, as long as the a is an integer and p does not divide a. Okay? So our next practice will be to use Euler's criterion to evaluate the Legendre symbol -6 and 11. Okay, so how would we approach that? Well, here's what we can do. We know by Euler's theorem that -6 modulo 23, right, the Legendre symbol of that, using Euler's criterion, can be evaluated as -6 raised to the 11th power modulo 23. Okay. Now, where did we get 11th power? We got the 11th power by saying 23 minus 1, which is 22, divided by 2. Okay. So we would then need to figure out, well, what is -6 to the 11th modulo 23? And if we had a tool such as Wolfram Alpha, I could come over here and say, okay, well, what is -6 to the 11th modulo 23? I press enter, makes its computation, and it reads as 22. Okay, so I have 22, right? -6 raised to the 11th power mod 23 is going to be 22. Okay, now check this out. -6 to the 11th, we know that -6 is going to be equivalent to, let's see here, -6 plus 23, right? And if we go through and do that work, we see that we get, once again, 22 mod 23, right? If you wanted to work with positive, you could do that as well. Okay, so what does that tell us? That tells us that the Legendre symbol of -6 modulo 23 will equal -1. Right? Of course, we can check this and say, hey, what's the Legendre symbol of -6 and 23? And we see our result. That result is -1. Okay. Now, what I've just noticed is that in this work, we were actually asked to find -6 Legendre symbol modulo 11. I was looking at this 23 previously, so my apologies. Right, that if I had the Legendre symbol of -6 modulo 11, this would be equivalent to -6 raised to the 5th power modulo 11. Okay, so that was my mistake on this 11. I was reading the 23 here, but really it should have been modulo 11. And 11 is a prime number, and 11 is not a factor or a divisor of -6. Right? So -6 mod 11, I can come over here to -6, right? And we're going to be raised to the 5th power, and we want to be mod 11. And so that's -6 raised to the 5th power is equivalent to 1 mod 11. So therefore, our Legendre symbol of -6 modulo 11 will equal 1, which indicates that -6 is a quadratic residue modulo 11. Right? And we, of course, we could come over here and see, hey, is that true? And we say, what are the quadratic residues modulo 11? We see that the quadratic residues modulo 11 do include 5, And we know that negative 6 plus 11 is equal to 5, right? So we would be able to say, hey, that this is actually going to be the same as the Legendre symbol of 5 modulo 11, okay? Because if negative 6 is a quadratic residue modulo 11, then 5 must also be a quadratic residue modulo 11, okay? Of course, we could also check our work saying, hey, what's the Legendre symbol of negative 6 modulo 11? And inputting that, we see that we do get the answer of 1, which is what we are looking to get, okay? Had we needed to do this by hand, I would have been able to say the following, that negative 6 squared is congruent to 3 modulo 11. So then that would mean that negative 6 squared times negative 6 would be congruent to something modulo 11. And of course, we said negative 6 squared is 3, so I would have 3 squared times negative 6 modulo 11. 3 squared is 9, and 9 is negative 2 modulo 11, so I would have negative 2 times negative 6 modulo 11, which would be 12 modulo 11. And of course, 12 modulo 11 is the same as 1. So once again, different approaches that we could use, and in any approach, right, but we do get that negative 6 modulo 11, the Legendre symbol is 1, indicating that negative 6 is a quadratic residue modulo 11, but generally you would say as 5 is the quadratic residue modulo 11. Do be careful when you're working through your work. You don't make a careless mistake of evaluating the wrong problem. All right? This work is correct, but this is not the work associated with this problem. Be careful, be organized, okay? Even if you don't have access to Wolfram Alpha, you can still do the work to get to your solution. This has been Maths with El Profe Lo. I appreciate your time.